Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Inkwell podcast. I'm your host, Todd Rayner, and I have a really fun guest on today. Let's bring on Tony, and let's just get into this. How you doing, Tony?
I'm good, Todd. Thank you for having me. Hello to all
Yeah,
your
my pleasure.
guests.
You're welcome. So you've been making comics for a while. What
Yeah,
really
16,
inspired you?
16 years and
16
counting.
years. Okay.
Yes, sir.
What inspired you to really pursue kind of getting into the comics, indie comics, and creating and all that stuff?
Well, actually, it was a fluke. Just being honest, it was a fluke. My wife and I were celebrating our not honeymoon, our anniversary out in San Diego, and we were lounging at the hotel, and Tyrese Gibson came into the bar. We were having drinks, and he was going. This is 2009. He was going to San Diego Comic Con to, I guess, promote his book he had at the time with Image called Mayhem. And I was like, "You're at Comic Con?" He was like, "Yeah." He was like, basically asked me, "Did I know about comics?" I'm like, "Yeah, yeah." I was like, "I was in comics all my life as a kid." He's like, "Well, you and your wife going?" I said, "No, we're here for anniversary." And he was like, "Well, come past the show." And I was like, "Are you serious?" So my wife was like, "Yeah, I'm going to stay at the pool. You can go do that." So I went and I was watching how he was doing his thing and promoting Comic Con. And like I said, I'm a lifelong comic book fan. So I was like, "Oh man, this is so cool. First time ever being a Comic Con, the real Comic Con." And I'm just walking around and just talking to different vendors and people, creators. And I noticed that there weren't a lot of black creatives at Comic Con. And I was like, "Why is that?" And they were like, "Oh no, we're here." They were like, "You just gotta know where to find us." And they were like, "Well, you coming back tomorrow?" I said, "Well, I don't know." I said, "He just gave me a pass for the day, I believe." And so one of the creators, a guy named Kobe Marks, he had a book out called Storm Chasers. And he was like, "No, no." He said, "Your badge lets you come back tomorrow." He said, "Come back to what's called the Black Panel tomorrow." And I was like, "Okay." So I went to that Black Panel, and it was star-studded from top to bottom. Uh, just people from all over the media and entertainment spectrum. And I was like, wow, I was like, all these people like comic books. I'm like, I knew comics was big in my life. I didn't know these many people and these famous people enjoy comics like that. And just upon listening to what they were presenting and how they were saying how, now's the time, it's open to different people of all ethnicities, and the advent of the internet makes it even more open to those who want to get into the business. And I was like, well, did some writing in college, and always loved comics. Why not? Give it a go. And I had an entertainment company back home. I'm from the East Coast, anyway. So like, let's give it a go. I was like, we can make it happen. So went home, and Advent Comics began, and 16 years later, we're still here, and actually doing pretty well. Doing pretty well.
That's nice. Are we talking about like the Tyrese Gibson from Fast and Furious
Yes,
movies?
yes. That's what threw me, because I didn't, when I went up to him, I just wanted to say, "Hey, like your movies, like your
Hmm.
music," and leave, didn't want to, bother him, celebrities. They get that all the time, sure.
Hmm.
So he was like, "Yeah, basically I'm out here for Comic Con." I was like, "Oh, got a new movie coming out?" That was my first question. He's like, "No, for my comic book." And I was like, "Comic book?" I'm like, "When did you do comics?" He was like, "Oh, I'm with Image and got this book called Mayhem coming out." And I was like, "No way." So I even took a picture on my face. It's on my Facebook page, and he was, like I said, I credit him for being the reason that I started that. Well, one of the reasons I
Hmm.
started that, because if he hadn't opened the door for me to go and to see him, I would never have talked to um, Dennis Cowan and Michael Davis and Ken Lashley, and they were the ones who actually fermented the seed. And I was like, "I'm going to do this when I get home. I'm going to start Advent Comics." And that was the formation of Advent Comics.
That's really cool. Yeah, to have like a celebrity be one of those reasons, right? To kind of motivate you, or at least that introduction. That's really wild.
Because if it wasn't for him, I never would have been able to go to San Diego Comic Con, and
Yeah.
it never would have started the genesis of Advent Comics.
You mentioned doing some writing in college. I mean, do you have like formal writing within like comic scripts or screenwriting?
I went to college for accounting and business, but I always loved to write. Even as a kid, I'd write my own comic books, and different things like that. So I would take writing courses, and all through high school, won awards, Panhellenic awards, and different things. And so writing was always a passion. So I was like, let me go ahead and try this. Let's see what happens. And I was shocked, and everyone around me was shocked because at the time, mind you, just up until last year, I was a career firefighter. So I've been firefighting for like 30 years. So everybody around me, including my in-laws, even my wife, were like, "You sure you want to write a comic book?" And I'm like, "I'm sure." And I sold my first comic back in 2000. We finished in 2009, and it sold on Amazon. And I was like, I can say I did it. A dream come true. There was a comic shop from Dubai who contacted me personally. Was like, "Hey, you think you can sell us your copies of your book without us going through Amazon?" And I was like, "You want to buy my comic book?" And they were like, "Yeah." I'm like, okay. And so that was one thing that was like, wow, it actually sold. Some people like it. But when my wife saw, I got my first royalty check from Amazon, she was like, "You got that much from selling comic books?" She was like, "Think you could write another one?" I'm like, "I think I can write another one." So I wrote a follow up to that. The first book was called Pandemonium Evil Incarnate. It was an 80-page graphic novel. The second one was like a, a follow up to that where it introduced superheroes. Well, let me go back. To make my comic book universe separate from what Marvel and DC and everybody else was doing, I didn't like gritty comics. Because at the time, in 2000s, late 90s, all you saw was gritty comics. Everybody was doing gritty. So I said, well, let's do something a little different. So the Pandemonium Evil Incarnate book was basically my shot at dark and gritty comics. So everything was dark and gritty. But at the focal point, I also wanted to put in something different. And I said, okay, what would happen if I put in a biblical God and devil into my universe and made them central characters and wrote stories off of them as well? And people were like, nobody's going to read that. It'll never sell. It connected with a lot of people. So in my universe, we have pretty much a biblical God, a biblical devil, as well as superheroes and everything else you could think of. And people resonated with it. And those books sold. And like I said, we sell books from all ranges. The only type of book I will not sell is definitely the Triple X books. I have a lot of kids who like our stuff, so I don't touch those yet. But some of my fans may be a little pissed off at me when I do this next book called Dog Valley. So we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah, and we'll get to that because I like always talking with creators about their stories and the books that they write, kind of like why they write these things and how they got there, right? I would ask like what keeps you motivated to continue to write books? Because I mean, we're talking 16 years. That's a long time.
Well, believe it or not, back when I actually tried out for Marvel. Marvel had this thing back in early 2000, I believe it was. It was called the Epic line, where they were looking for writers and artists. And I took that application and I went crazy and I submitted 20 stories to Marvel. No lie. 20 stories at one time. And none of them really got pushed back, but there was this one story that did. And it was based at the time around Adam Warlock and all the. I'm a big Jim Starlin fan. Love early Warlock and Captain Marvel and all their cosmic stuff. Imperial Guard, love it. So I had wrote a big, epic pitch for basically a maxi series just with just cosmic characters, and they were, you know, off-brand cosmic characters would be, which would be considered D-list characters, the A-list characters, and it got a little poor, and you know, they hit me up from editorial a couple times and was like, interesting, you know, what's the premise? So they wanted to know more. So I made it to the second round of the editorial, and they were like, well, sounds good, but you know, we decided to go a different way with it. A few months later, I found out they decided to kill Warlock again. So I'm like, oh, okay, I see why. But when I started Advent, I said, well, you know, Marvel liked that story. Why don't I dust it off and bring it back? But of course, I couldn't use Adam Warlock and some of the Marvel characters. So, you know, I created a character called Genesis, who was my version of Adam Warlock. And I said, well, how can I make this exciting and different, but at the same time keep the premise of the cosmic, you know, far flung and reaching epic that I want to do? So what I did was I included indie comic characters. I reached out to over 100 indie comics publishers and creators, big and small, and I petitioned them to be in this book. And lo and behold, a lot of them accepted. Matter of fact, the story became Cosmos. So in the very first book that I published, Pandemonium Evil Incarnate, the first page sets up Cosmos. I knew eventually I was going to do Cosmos. By hook or by crook, Marvel liked that story. I figured, okay, I will tell my story. I'll do it in a different way. So the first page of the first book I ever produced was a setup for Cosmos. And like I said, it resonated, and other indie creators kind of saw what I was doing. A couple publishers were like, it might sell, you know. We'll let you, you know, we'll work out something, let you use our characters. And so Cosmos was born, and I did Cosmos, but I had to set up my universe before I could get to Cosmos. So a lot of people were like, they were getting on me bad because they were like, you know, you introduced a deep space character and characters in Dark Light and Crew. You introduced your Supermanish character, Titan Ultraman on Earth. Well, they're like, you're putting out all these number ones, but you're not giving a story. But I was basically world building, and I had to put in all the pieces around the story in order to be able to tell Cosmos. So no one knew at the time. They just were like, man, you just keep putting out number ones. We wanted a full story. And I'm like, it's coming. It's coming. All the stories and all the tales are up here. I was like, but I have to lay the bricks down before I can get to the actual stories. So when I finally got to Cosmos came out, the first issue came out around 2013. And by that time, I had laid enough of the foundation in order for the story to begin. And so people were like, oh, this is what you've been doing. And, you know, it's like I said, it resonated. And so people were still like, okay, so. But the first creator who appeared, or first publisher creator who appeared, was at the end of Cosmos 4, Mike Byrne and Steve Rude's Nexus from Dark Horse appears on the last page of the story. And everybody was like, no freaking way. How'd you get, you know, did you steal that character? I'm like, no. It's everything signed, the contracts, you know. This is really their character. This is really Nexus. And they were like, no way. So everybody was like, wow, okay. And the people start taking notice. And then, you know, as I start slowly unveiling different guest stars and characters, they were like, no way. You got Andy Smith, you got Image, you got Eric Larson, Savage Dragon, you got this character. And so now Cosmos is like, it's starting to blow up. And we're in the final arc of that story now. It's a 12-issue maxi series. I literally just finished issue 9, which was like a 40-page giant. And issue 10, 11, and 12 have already started production. But I want to get issue 9 to everybody's hands first. And it actually goes on sale in stores in 2026. And then I also did like a crossover one-shot called Cosmos War. and that one has like 30 different publishers in it, and people like Big Bang Comics, Gary Carson. You have, like I said, Eric Larson's in that one with Savage Dragon. Dancing and his Argo 5, you name it, Concrete Comics, they're in it. Everyone is in this book and in this series. So people are like, how in the world are you making this stuff happen? I was like, it took a long time. It took like 20 years of putting this story together and of talking to these creators and signing contracts and, just good faith. Hey, I want your character to be in the book, and hey, well, you let me have your character in my book. Done deal. So this has been making it happen, and slowly but surely, people are coming around to that particular story. And like I said, it's been well received. Well received.
Nice. You mentioned Jim Starlin. What are some of your biggest influences, whether like comic folks or film, whatever?
Oh, I love comics. Like I said, I've been a comic fan since I was 6 years old. My cousin at the time, he started getting into girls, and he wanted to get rid of his comics. So I begged my dad to let me go over his house and pick up his comics. So I picked up his comics, and it started a love affair with comics. I love science fiction movies. I love horror movies. Um, I mean, I love reading books. So I'm just a big nerd. Call it what it is. I'm a big nerd.
So everything basically has been an influence for us.
Everything, everything. You might as well say everything. Yes, sir.
Yeah. What would you see since you've been doing it for, well over a decade? And the landscape of independent comics has definitely changed in the last 15, 20 years. What do you feel are some of the challenges that you've come across over the years?
Like all, well, I won't say all because that's not a fair depiction. A lot of indie creators, their barriers, whether it's time. Like I said, I was a career firefighter, so my time was a little different. Whereas I worked shift work, so I was able to work a lot on my comics at the same time. But I was holding down a full time job. So, and then I went back to college a couple times while I was in the fire department. So, time and finances initially were the biggest impediments to producing comics. Um, Now, thankfully, I've been blessed, knock on wood, that when I started Advent, we did everything the opposite of what most people do. Whereas most people build a name here in the States, like I said, my first set of books sold wide of the country. And the biggest plus, I'll say plus, but the biggest help to Advent was that we were selling out of the country before people knew who we were in America. So by the time I had went to Diamond in 2017, I believe, I was already selling in 54 countries around the world. And so they were like, "Are you serious?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And so they were like, "No, you're not." And I'm like, "Yeah, I am." And then I told them who I was going to publish. I said, "Well, I got books coming out by um, Mike Barron, his Buddy McGill book, and I got this book coming out, and Bart Sears is doing the art." And they were like, "No." They were like, "Hold on." They were like, "We'll get you back in about 20 minutes." And they're like, "Oh, we got you in Diamond." They're like, "We're ready to go. Let's go." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, cool. Thank you." Thank you. Yeah, and it's sad because as a kid, my dad would take me 50 miles one way to Silver Spring, Maryland, and I would go to the comic book shop of Steve Jeppy, the man who ended up forming Diamond. So I've known Mr. Jeppy since I was a kid, since I was like 10 years old. And it's funny, I had seen him in an event once I became a comic. Um, I still don't like the word pro, but when I started doing comics, I met him at an event that he did at the Jeppy Museum. And it was showcasing the milestone creators who I love. And so Miss Jeppy remembered me. And I was like, you just made my evening. I was like, more so than being here among these high powered guys like Dennis Cowan and Don McGregor and all these different fake people who were in attendance. I'm like, you remember me? He was like, yeah. He said, you're the kid that's coming like pretty much every Saturday with your dad's allowance he would give you. I'm like, yeah. I'm like, yep. He said, you used to drive a long way. I said, yes, sir. I said, I'm still in the comics like that. So it was kind of bittersweet for me when Diamond, everything that happened with Diamond the few years, because I personally knew Mr. Jeppy. But yeah, it happens. Everything happens for a reason. Diamond was a great launching pad, and we bounced back. We're with Philbo Distribution now, and Philbo is a new distribution hub. Yeah, but a lot of great names like Billy Tucci's with them. I believe Crusade Comics. Myra Michaels is with them. Antarctic Press. A lot of different other publishers. So we're in good good hands over there.
Yeah, I know Phil's doing a lot of great stuff.
Phil Russet. Yeah, Phil's a good guy. He's worked hard on developing Philbo distribution, and he has something magical that's starting to take shape. I don't know if anybody else has noticed it yet, but as soon as I saw it, I was like, "We're in." I'm like, "We're in," because I could
Yeah,
see the dedication he's put into making this happen, and he works almost as hard as I do. So, anybody who works that hard, I know they're about their business. So I'm like, "Yeah, let's go."
yeah. Do you feel mentioned early on that you really started writing all these different stories for Cosmos and releasing kind of separate stories in issue ones and stuff? Do you feel that having multiple titles kind of maybe whether it hurt growth versus increased growth?
Definitely. Initially, it hurt the growth because fans couldn't understand why I kept releasing just number one. So I'm like, well, once I explained it to them what I had in mind, because like I said, Advent is all up here. So that 16 years, that I'm still in the first overall story of Advent. So all the number ones, Cosmos, it's all part of the same plan. So people just couldn't understand. They were like, why don't you just do more than issue ones? I was like, because, I have to set up certain things. So one of the things that happened to Cosmos was Earth gets invaded, and the the government run superheroes have to step in. Well, until I release Project Homeland, you don't know who those government heroes are. It wouldn't make sense. So I had to put all the different pillars together before I could just do it. But people initially were like, Advent, they're just good for number ones. But then once the stories Cosmos started progressing, and then I did more than issue ones because at the time, like I said, I had a plan, and then I could release issue twos and different threes. So they were like, "Oh, we get it now." So a lot of people were like, "They were like, bro, I just thought that you just want to just do number ones forever." I'm like, "No, I had to world build the universe for any of this to make sense first." But
Yeah,
now
that
that
makes
people now
sense.
that people see it, they know, okay, he's legit. Like I said, and most of our titles are you know well past issue one. So
Yeah. And having multiple titles and your website and all this, and we'll get into these Kickstarters here in a second in your website. How do you kind of handle the marketing and the promotional side of things? Because there's a lot going on with Advent.
there's a lot. There's a lot, and there's more every day. So it's a task because, to be honest, as successful as Advent is, it's still just me. So not to throw a somber tone on the interview, but I had a brain aneurysm in September, the beginning of September. So I was in ICU for like 2 weeks. So all of the marketing and the different things that I planned on doing for Advent kind of didn't happen because it's just me. So going forward in 2026, we're gonna kind of make some changes and make Advent a little bit more than just Tony Kittrell. But we're at that level where we can expand. Um, so you're going to see that more with the just me approach to marketing and promoting titles. As a matter of fact, I have a new imprint that comes out called Lore. And Lore is special for a couple of reasons because not only will it initially start as an imprint, I'm developing this group to be their own publisher. So at some point, once I feel they're ready, and they're pretty much ready almost now. I'm gonna let them go, and they're gonna become their own comic book publisher. So instead of just creating titles and create their own books like most publishers do, I'm basically about to start creating publishers now. So Lore is our first one, and we've got a couple titles coming out from the Lore group. Killer Men. We got Odd Frog. We got Decoys. A few other books. Um, so my 2026 is going to be very busy trying to get them up and running as their own publishing house, as well as still handling Advent business and doing the different things they need to do to make sure Advent's successful.
Hmm. Well, let's take a look at your website here because I mean you got a lot of books, to be
I
honest.
do, but I must tell everyone I had I had switched the people who did my Advent website, and a lot of stuff got jumbled up, and I didn't like the way it came out. So I am personally right now doing as a anniversary gift to myself. I'm doing a top to bottom revamp on our website. So this is how it's going to look now. You can say this is kind of like the beginning, but you're going to see it next year. It's going to look totally different. So we're revamping the website.
But we can, I mean, even
Oh yeah, you can
you're
still
revamping it.
purchase. You can
Yeah.
still
Okay.
purchase physical copies, the digital copies. You can still look at different uh, the box sets, the t-shirts, apparel, the posters, all that good stuff, prints. All that stuff is still accessible. It's just that basically I wanted to do something different because I didn't like the way the company I'm with now did our website. So
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, there's Cosmos number one. You got all the
yeah,
issues of Cosmos out. So yeah, really good art. Looks like a lot of
and
fun.
yeah, and that was one of the things impressed upon me when I started Advent. I wanted to do a couple things. I wanted to put high quality comics in the hands of all of our fans, and then guarantee fan satisfaction because most people were like, "You can't guarantee that." I'm like, "Well, if I go out and I find the best talent from the big two, and I put talented up and comers in our books as well, along with new and fun and fresh characters. I'm like, people will resonate to it, and they did. And I have to be thankful because on my first book, um, Bart Sears, Andy Smith, Andrew Dollhouse um, participated. Greg LaRoque, he did the art on the book called The Regulators. Bart Sears did the interior on a book called Project Homeland. So I was having all these different talented creators. Nathan Diaz, before Marvel stole him from me, was part. He did Titan. He was the artist on Titan. So I mean, I had all of these different guys, and people were like, "Wow!" They were like, "You got a killer. Your books always look good. You always have good stories." And I was like, "Yeah, that's kind of what we pride ourselves on." Sean Damian Hill did a couple of those covers. So everybody's like, "How do you get all these?" I said, "Well, basically, that was my mantra. Was that we're gonna put the soul back in the comics. For me, that what that means is great stories, incredible art, and fun. Those are the three components that I believe that every comic book should consist of. Because when I was a kid, I would race home from the 7-Eleven after I bought a new comic book, sit in my room and read it, and I'd be done in about 15, 20 minutes. And not just that the comic was just that pedestrian or anything like that. I just enjoyed and consumed comics. I just had a love for comics. So I want to put that back into the comics and for the kids and the adults today. So that's what we do. And we, like I said, we have all genre of books, whether it's superheroes, religious titles, horror titles, thrillers, crime noir. We have titles, black, like just past Black Star Line, where I gave creators who were black and brown or people of color who didn't get a shot in comics. I let them write, draw, um, letter, color, and gave them basically a shot to get into the industry. So we have all kinds of titles in our line of books. And then back in, I think it was like 2014, we started our creator owned line. You won't find it on the website because of the contracts that I do with the creators. I don't put our books on the website yet. But with this revamp, I'm talking to the creators of our creator online, and we'll start putting those on the website so that you can buy those as well. Um, so it's called Unbound Realms, and we've been cooking and booking with those as well. There are a lot of guys who came under the Unbound Realms line because I believed in their books because I was seeing a lot of guys who would do Kickstarters, and the Kickstarters, once they were over, it was like, okay, what next? What are you going to do now? And most guys were like, well, I can't do anything else. What do you mean you can't do anything else? They're like, well, that's it. I was like, no, let's get your books into comic book shops. So I made that my mission to start putting these creators who people didn't know about into comic book shops. Um, so some of our creator owned lines, of course, one title I named already was Mike Barron's Buddy McGill, Miskatonic High, Cop 2, Kane. Current guys like G Man Comics, got them in the comic shops. Uh, TDJ Comics in their Atlas book, got them in the comics shops. So I'm taking publishers who have not gotten a shine, whose books I think should be seen and could, rank right up there with the big twos books, and I put them in the shops. So that's that's one way I can give back to the indie community.
Yeah, and that's a lot of indie creators, we like to support each other. We like to kind of give back to the community. So that's important.
I always want to do something like that because even though I back a lot of people's projects, super back on Kickstarter, super back on Indiegogo, I felt that wasn't enough. So, like I said, let's go ahead and start putting these different publishers, guys who create, into shops. And even with that, that still wasn't enough. So that's why I did lore, because I'm like, okay, let's take these guys' titles, let's make them their own publishers, real publishers. So that's my goal for next year, is to launch. It's going to initially, like I said, lore is going to start as an imprint, but then when I let them go, they're going to be a publisher, their own publisher.
Yeah, you mentioned Dow Valley. Let's get into that.
Yes, Dole Valley. There's a story behind that too. I gotta share with you and your fans. As I was about to retire, like I said, I was a 30-year career firefighter, paramedic. So as I'm about to retire, a lot of my station buddies had come to me and was like, hey, or a group of my station buddies had come to me and said, you never put us in your comics, because I would take certain individuals over the years, and I would put them in to my different comics as characters, whether it be Titan, whether it be Titan Ultraman, or whether it be a couple of horror stories. I would put them in different superhero books and things, and they were like, and my buddies were like, "Hey man, put us in your books." I'm like, "Well, you guys never expressed interest of wanting to be in the comics," and so a group of 8 of my buddies, known for decades, you got to put us in the comic. They were like, gotta put us in the comic. And they were like, well, we don't want to be in a superhero story. We want comics with blood and guts and women. And I guess they thought I wouldn't do it. I'm like, okay, cool. And one of the things you gotta know about well, two things you need to know about firefighters. We're a big family. You know, you work with these guys 24 to 40 hours straight. So you get to know them sometimes more than your own family. So we're a family, but we also prank each other mercilessly. So Dog Valley is my way of uh, putting my brothers and sisters in the fire department who wanted to be in this particular story in the book didn't want to be in superhero books, so I put them in a horror story. It basically Dog Valley is like a mash, a comedic mashup. I won't say comedy. It's a little mix of everything. 80s slasher films, 90s grindhouse horror, comedy, combination of sexy girl comics, you name it. It's in this book, and it's a good. It actually is a good story. It came out to be a good story. Um, so, group of 8 friends go to celebrate a bachelor party. One of my buddies, who actually did get married, he is the groom, and they're celebrating his final weekend of freedom. And one of our other friends, who always has the bright ideas, Tate, it's like, hey, we ought to send him out on a high that we haven't done before. So these friends go to a lifestyle resort to celebrate, but things don't go the way they want it to go. And it's like I said, it's a horror book for a reason. It's a horror book
Yeah,
for a reason.
nice. Yeah, I got a solid amount of followers so far, so that's always good. That's a good sign.
Oh, okay. How many we up to now? Let's see.
55 looks like.
Okay, cool, cool. Yeah, I didn't think people would resonate to it, but yeah, once we get to about 100, then I'm gonna go ahead and launch the Kickstarter. Um, I want enough people to take a look at it and be able to see if they like it or not. And once they see the talent that's on it and what we're offering as far as this Kickstarter goes, because my goal on Kickstarter is, I did my first Kickstarter back in 2013. And even when I did it, it was a crossover with 4 other creators. And I wasn't a big fan of Kickstarters initially. I'm like, well, why should we make the fans pay for our books to be made? And I'm like, we can do that ourselves. I'm like, I was like, no, that's not going to happen. I'm not going to make them help me pay for a book that I can pay for myself. But then I began to realize what Kickstarter actually was. Kickstarter is about community, and it's about finding your audience, finding people who get what you're doing, and basically they support what you're doing. And over the years, like I said, Cosmos actually is a Kickstarter. I won't say only because I print trade paperbacks, which I sell in bookstores like Barnes and Nobles and through used to be through Diamond before they left. But the only place you can get a initial release is on Kickstarter for Cosmos. That's it. Um, because I wanted to give something back. Once I started doing Kickstarters, I'm like, I got to make this so that these people who are showing their support and building up our community, I got to make this special for them. So Kickstarter became Cosmos became a Kickstarter only comic. And every Kickstarter that we do, I try to give them something new or something different, or something fun, and make it an event. So whether it be we were doing before blind bags, we were doing what was called mystery boxes. We would do mystery boxes. So whether it was give you prints or comics or never before released editions, we would do that. So every Kickstarter, we're doing something new, something fun, something different.
Kickstarter is definitely an exclusive thing, right?
Yeah,
It's one of those things you get it before anyone else. I always make sure my Kickstarter backers get books before they see me at a convention because I do sell all
exact,
my books separate from Kickstarter, you know.
exact. And over the course, whether it be my personal Kickstarter page or the Advent page or Indiegogo, I've done 32 successful Kickstarter campaigns. 31 have been fulfilled. and one is still in production now. One is well, one is in production, and actually one is in the fulfillment process now. But I'm always going to make sure that our fans who support us and believe in us are going to get what they paid for. But this last one, wow, I kind of bit off more. I'm confident in what I do, but this book, Epiphany Engine, which is massive on every scale, and I've had to navigate around the big three and work schedules and just a whole bunch Hollywood. It's been massive, but we're almost done. We're down to the last 16 pages of story. That includes the epilogue, and then once that's done, we'll be ready to send it off to lettering and get it in production and print. So it's been a year. It's been a year, but my mind, I tell everybody we'll have that book done in 6 months. Eh, kind of bit off more than I could chew with that one.
Yeah, I always tell people I think the average fan or the average person doesn't necessarily always realize like how much work goes into making even just a single comic.
Yes, a single comic has taken me. I'm not even gonna lie. I mean, a couple of them have taken like a couple of years to make. Just because you're doing things yourself, depending on you have to work around different schedules, and then there's always proofreading, edits, and then you want to make sure that the print's right, so you're getting proofs of the print, and then you're sending it back. And I mean, comics are a lengthy, expensive process. So by you
Yeah,
being a creator, you know that. You definitely know
yeah,
that.
absolutely. Well, yeah, it's been a pleasure talking with you, and
Thank you
you're
so much.
welcome.
I
You're welcome.
appreciate you and your fans. Thank you.
Yeah, and we'll wrap this episode up, and I will see everyone on the next episode.
Thank you guys. Everybody take care. Enjoy your holidays. Happy uh, whatever you celebrate, whether it be Hanukkah, Christmas, Kwanzaa. Celebrate, be safe, be healthy, be happy. And hopefully we'll see you all into the next year, 2026. Advent Comics will be here.
All right, thank you.